Now this particular segment takes me back a little bit because one of my very first appearances on the Woodsmith Shop was talking about tuning up and using your bandsaw. That was 14 years ago. I've learned quite a bit since then. And in my own shop, the bandsaw is my only stationary saw. So I use it for everything from making rip cuts and resawing to cutting joinery and making smooth curves. So I depend on it to work right as soon as I walk up to it. So when we talk about this, let's talk about it in terms of things that you can check whenever you're changing a blade. Now, it's a pretty simple process, and it's frankly going to take longer to explain than it is to actually do it. But follow along with me here. We'll start by opening up the saw, and you can see there's a thin metal blade that's flexible that runs around two wheels, an upper wheel and then a lower wheel on the saw. Now the first thing you need to do is make sure that you're always working with a sharp blade. Now it's not a time to be frugal here and try to get the most use out of a blade. The duller a blade gets, the more it's going to wander off track and lead to a lot of frustration and inaccurate cuts. When you put a blade on, you're going to set it on the wheels, both the top and the bottom. And you want to adjust its tracking. And by that I mean that the blade should be centered on the top wheel. What that does is make sure that the teeth are pointing straight at you. You'll adjust the tracking on the wheel, and by the tracking, you'll adjust the angle in very subtle amounts of this top wheel. There's a knob and a stop on the backside that you'll make adjustments to. And then just rotate the wheel by hand when there's light tension applied to the blade. Once you see that that blade is running right in the middle, then you can set the stop on the tracking, and then you'll tension the blade with this knob up here. Now the amount of tension that you apply to a blade depends on the width of it. Most saws will have some kind of a gauge or a chart on the inside that's going to get you in the ballpark. You don't want to apply too little tension because the blade can get pushed off the wheel, or it will create a little slack in the cut and then you'll get like a barrel shape of the cut. I usually try to make sure that the blade feels like it's tight and resists moving side to side when you push on the side of the blade. Now here in the Woodsmith Shop, we end up moving around our saw quite a bit. It's on a mobile base and we can just bring it in right where we need it. The problem is that when we move it, we're often going to pull on the table at the top. What can happen with that is that the table can then get shifted out of square. And it can be pretty subtle so that we don't know that it's happened until it's too late and a cut is spoiled. So just to be sure, every time you check and replace your blade, grab a square and see if the table is square to the blade. Once it is, you can lock it in place. Now most bandsaws have an adjustable bolt to act as a stop and a pad below the table. That way, if the table shifts out of position, you can quickly get it back into place and know that it's right at 90 degrees. Once you have your table squared, the next thing to do is to make sure that the blade is fully supported. Like I said, it's a flexible steel band. And when you're making cuts, the blade will twist and want to follow those curves. So what you want to do is adjust the guide assemblies. There's one up on top and then one below the table. Now, each guide assembly is going to vary a little bit depending on the make and model of your saw. On this one, the guide assemblies consist of a set of roller bearings on either side and then a roller thrust bearing behind the blade. What I'm looking for on both the upper guide assembly and the lower one is to bring it so that the guide bearings are just next to the blade, not quite touching. So I'll move it over until I see the blade shift, back off just a little, and then lock it down. You can really get caught up in trying to get specific distances, but it's not that big a deal. What I'm looking for is just a small amount of light in between the bearing and the blade itself. And you'll do the same thing for the thrust bearing behind the blade. What you're looking for is to provide just enough support that as you push a workpiece into the blade, you're not going to push the blade off the wheels of the saw. Once you've taken care of the upper guide assembly, you want to do the same thing down below. Sometimes that can be a little harder to get to and easily forgotten, but make sure you remember it. Finally, just as Chris talked about with using the saw, You want to use the dust collection and then periodically clean out and vacuum out the dust inside the case. By following a simple pre-flight test every time you change the blade on your saw, you can be sure that whenever you go to use it, you're going to get those safe, accurate cuts that you're looking for.
Hey guys, thanks for watching. If you like this tip and you want to see more from Woodsmith, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. We'll be uploading woodworking videos and tips weekly. And trigger the bell, that way you get notified when we do upload those videos. Any links for plans or supplies we use for these projects will be down in the description. As always, thank you for watching.